Good evening, friends. Thanks for joining us today. We all of us know Dr. Atre, so I'm not going to introduce him this time, but I'll just quickly summarize what we did in the last session. In the last session, we have learned what social and emotional intelligence is and how we can identify our emotional state based on physiological symptoms. We also understood how to develop our social and emotional intelligence by traveling and meeting people with diverse background, going out, attending events, etc. Today we are going to discuss something very important for all the professionals, individuals, entrepreneurs, and company executives. That is about team building. All of us are working as a team, either as in the company, in the startup, or even in the family. In the family, we all of us are working as a team. We are part of a team. So we will be touching upon this topic in greater detail than what we did last time. Dr. Atre, basically, as you know, team building is a very, very critical aspect, and there are so many points involved into that particular. But basically, I would like to touch upon four major aspects of it. One is about selection, selection of an individual. That is about recruitment. If we are recruiting somebody as a our colleague or as a team member or as an employee. Another part of selection is we are selecting somebody as our co-promoter or the partner or as a partner in our journey as an entrepreneur. That is first part. Second part I would like to touch upon is motivation. At any point of time, basically in a team, when we join a team, we are highly motivated. But during the time and during the journey, there are many points when we feel demotivated, or one of the members, or some of the members of the team feel demotivated. So motivating becomes a very important part when we try to understand that emotional and social intelligence status. So that I would like to you to touch upon. Third part is communication. Communication, there are too many, one to many, many to one. But communication, what we will try to understand today, what we would like you to explain us today is, one to many. That, you are communicating, an entrepreneur is communicating with the team members. And the team, that is one to many, sort of communication. Another part is, a team leader is communicating with the team members. That is many to many, scenario communication, one to many, many to many. That part, I would like to you to throw some light upon. And most important part, which we are facing in every, day-to-day situation, is conflict resolution. It's the ongoing phenomenon in every team. So how do we really leverage uh, emotional and social intelligence to resolve conflicts and bond the team in such a way that conflicts hardly take place. I can't say that we can nullify it when there won't be any conflicts at all, but we can resolve those conflicts in a productive and mutually beneficial way. These are the four topics I would request you to touch upon, and I start with the first question. Right? First is, as I said you, every leader or an entrepreneur has a unique style of leadership. He has a unique personality. So how this personality and style is going to affect the culture of an organization?
I think it's a wonderful expanse for this session, Mr. Joshi. Now,
Thank you.
coming down to the first point that you talked about, I think the first question, if I'm not wrong, you've asked that what is the impact that a leader or probably an entrepreneur has on the culture of the organization? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
No. Now we have to understand that biggest job of any leader or entrepreneur is to set the emotional climate of the workplace. Most of the people don't realize this, but all of us are transmitters and receivers of emotions. So each one of us has this amazing ability to make someone's day a little better or worse, uh, by just ignoring someone's compliment, by ignoring someone's greeting. We can make that person's day a little worse by wishing on our own, or probably asking a question or two about his or her well-being. We could probably kindle in that person a feeling that he or she is being cared for, or is being valued or cherished. So each one of us is an emotional transmitter as well as receiver, and it is typically called emotional economy. So if you look at any workplace, you would realize that there is this emotional economy going on. So there are transactions day in, day out. There are people who are making debits and credits. There are people who are withdrawing. There are people who are making a big withdrawal by shouting, or probably making a big deposit by forgiving. So there is this economy, emotional economy at the workplace. Now, coming to leader or entrepreneur, if at all, we are talking about emotional transactions and emotional transmission and receiving, then all these leaders and entrepreneurs, they have this amazing prerogative of setting the right emotional climate by being a responsible emotional transmitter. I'll give you an example of it. Suppose you want your team to focus on a task and would want them to converge their energies. So, as a leader or entrepreneur, when you walk into that workplace today, make sure that you have a very sincere, a very precise, a very convergent mode of carrying yourself. And when you will enter the workplace that way, you would realize that somehow, almost a freaky impact of that would be that people around you would start aligning their moods and modes with yours. And
Sorry to interrupt, Dr. Atre, but would you, elaborate more on that? I mean, carrying yourself in a professional way, carrying in yourself in a
yeah, I'll tell you.
sincere way.
Uh,
Yeah.
I think it's a very good question. Uh, I think if I were to give non-verbal traits of such a person who would want his or her team to converge their emotions and their thinking threads towards a task that probably requires research or requires a lot of convergent thinking, focus, concentration, then it is important. I mean, just see it this way: if a leader enters the workplace with a lot of with a lot of energy, with a lot of high fives, with a lot of compliments, with a lot of questions, with a lot of motivation, zest, then you would realize that when this leader would behave this way, there would be a certain amount of energy in the workplace. And when there would be energy in the workplace, the convergent mood would get hurt, you know. uh,
Oh.
and if a person, if a leader or an entrepreneur wants his or her team to do something divergent, to pursue a task with a lot of creativity, with a lot of openness, with a lot of collaboration, then if a leader enters the workplace in the opposite mood, for instance, if the person is somber, if the person is a little hunched, a little sad, then believe me, the emotional climate of the workplace would get hurt. So in that case, a leader has to transmit the kind of emotions he or she would like to percolate to the team members. I think in different way, I'm trying to tell you a very important fact, Mr. Joshi, that the worst thing that a leader can do or an entrepreneur can do is to be moody. Now, a moody person, when he or she enters the workplace, he or she, ends up creating an emotional climate that is very unpredictable. It's almost like, Bombay's rains or Bangalore's rains. So you just never really know when it'll pour. So the point is that for a lot of people, being an emotional transmitter doesn't come naturally, because they think that people work in isolation and their mood and their mode is there, mood or mode, and someone else's mood or mode is governed entirely by that person's intrinsic factors. So coming back to your question's clear answer, that a leader and an entrepreneur not only sets the culture of the organization through his or her conduct, but also creates emotional climate of a workplace by conveying the kind of emotions that he or she would like to would like the team to carry at this point of time, in proportion to or in alignment with the task at hand.
Oh, great. Very nicely explained, Dr. Atre. So, I mean, how a person carries himself while he, enters the organizations or while he meets his fellow, workers, that makes a lot of difference during and set up the tone for the day.
Yes, it does. That's a brilliant way to put it.
Oh, thanks. Now, I mean, based on his style, personality, how should, an entrepreneur select his co-partner or co-worker or, co-promoter? Because that is, one of the most important aspects I am reading around just now, that, those two partners have, parted ways. Even after, starting an organization, taking it to some heights, now they are parting ways just because of, their styles didn't match, they didn't have the same value system. So that becomes a very big setback for the team, the organization, and both of them individually, personally. So how do we really rectify it in the beginning itself, or how do we select the right person as our co-promoter or a partner, so that these kind of scenarios do not take place?
I think that's a very good question, and there are two ways of looking at it. First, Mr. Joshi, ideally you should choose someone who has shared values but complementing skills. So I'll repeat this line: someone who has shared values and complementing skills. And this is not something which I am saying. I think it's a pretty well established fact in the domain of business collaboration or probably entrepreneuring. So shared values but complementing skills. If you can have such a partner, such co-founder, then it is always good. But there is another way of looking at it. Personally, I don't see people as events. I see them as processes, and we all change. And in order to make a relationship work, you have to keep working on that relationship. You have to keep tracking the changes in a person's values, skills, temperament, ambitions, life circumstances. So you have to make sure that you remember that there is nothing like made for each other. You have to make each other for each other, and that is a process. I think a lot of people are guilty of treating people as events. I'll give you an example of it. Suppose Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak. Now when Steve
Yes.
Jobs and Steve Wozniak, when they started working, then of course there was a difference in age, so Steve Jobs was much younger. Now when they started working at that time, their visions aligned. Steve Wozniak was a man purely in love with technology, and of course, Steve Jobs was a man who was not as much in love with the technology part, but more in love with selling the technology or making that technology work for someone, or a little showmanship, a little flair for theatrics, all these things. So he was kind of more of a visionary, while Steve Wozniak was more of an engineer, if you want to put it. At that time, it was all fine. But as time passed, all of us who have read about Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, we would realize that something had started changing. Steve Jobs had a vision of making it a huge, $1 billion, and then, billion plus, and so, some more billions, and this kind of an organization. While Steve Wozniak was not interested in that. He was still at heart someone who wanted to tinker with technology, who wanted to work on his pet projects, who wanted to work on a very small, detailed driven work with just a few chosen team members. While Steve Jobs wanted him to carry that kind of a role, which is more of a big picture role. And this man enjoyed the details. He did not really enjoy the big picture work. In fact, he hated management. He would always say that I do not like management because it is not as value creative as engineering, and it is simply in many ways it is simply managing people who are doing the work that you would like to do. So I really loved it when Steve Wozniak put it this way.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
if you see, Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak just did not track each other's changes. Same thing happened with Bill Gates and his co-founder. So if you talk about Paul Allen and Bill Gates, then the same thing went wrong. If you talk about other big companies, you would realize that even if it's a big company or a small company, more often than not, people feel that if I was 18 and he or she was 18 when we started working, we knew each other very well, but we forget that when we are 32, 14 years have gone past by. A lot of water has has gone down the bridge, and now it is important to understand that the 18-year-old boy or girl you knew is no more that 18-year-old boy or girl. Now we are 32-year or 42-year man or woman, and there is a change. And this starts a very important discussion, that if we talk about emotional and social intelligence, you remember last time I had talked about a model that I personally follow and Socialigence, my company, follows, and that is triple A, that is awareness, attunement, and adaptability. So
Yeah,
if
yeah,
you are
yeah.
aware of your changes, you are attuned to other person's changes, and then you can adapt accordingly. Then even if you do not have a very solid co-founder to start with, you will have a very good co-founder as you go along. So at the end of the day, as I said, there are two parts of the answer to your question. A, it is good to have someone with shared values and complementing skills. But second, you always have to understand that you have to track the changes in a person, and be aware of your own changes, stay attuned to that person's change, and of course adapt accordingly. Now, Mr. Toshi, I'll also continue with another portion of it. You talked about not only choosing the partner or co-founder, you also talked about hiring right. I think
Yes, yeah, yeah, yeah.
most of the people get it, a little wrong when they think that you can spot someone with emotional intelligence. I genuinely believe that it takes a person with emotional intelligence to spot someone with emotional intelligence. So I think
Great.
unless you have emotional and social intelligence, you cannot really spot someone who has emotional and social intelligence. In fact, I've seen a lot of people who lack EQ. They would look at somebody with high EQ and they would actually comment or remark that, oh, this person is too sentimental. This person is too, touchy feely. This person is too soft to, work with people or something like that. So it takes a lot of emotional and social intelligence in you in order to spot someone who has it. And probably when people are hiring, it is important for those hiring or recruiting managers or HR personnel or domain experts or subject matter experts who are teaming up with HR people to first of all check or test their own current state of emotional and social intelligence, and if at all there are gaps, to fill those gaps, because only after that they can be in the right position to spot someone with high EQ or SQ.
Oh, great lesson, Dr. Atre. So first, point is adaptability. Both the partners or both the individuals need to adapt to each other. And it is a two-way process, I suppose. It is not only, one way. If only one person tries to adapt, then, it will become really difficult for him to
Yeah.
doing it continuously. And the other person will, maybe, become strong-headed or overconfident about, his own stance. So, I mean, it is a two-way process, and both of them need to come halfway.
And in fact, so very well said, Mr. Joshi. And I get back to the point that you had raised right at the outset in this discussion. You were also referring to relationships in personal lives, and I
Yeah.
genuinely believe that this applies even to people in their personal lives, because I'm not only an emotional and social intelligence expert. I mean, so-called expert. I would rather call it someone with a domain of expertise called social and emotional intelligence. Apart from that, I also practice as counseling psychologist, and I'm also an entrepreneur. So I have realized that as counseling psychologist, when I meet these people who are struggling with their couple issues, their couple goals, or their relationships, people don't realize that the person you married and the person you are currently married to, they are different persons. And the persons you will stay married to would also be different.
Oh,
I mean, just imagine when you are in your early 20s, probably a person has a little more, high sex drive. And then as a woman gets married, after that, a woman, say, gets pregnant, there are hormonal changes that would probably, not for all, but for most women, there would be a certain phase of life when she will be least interested in, getting into a conjugal or a sexual relationship, and she would feel a little, not repulsion or revulsion, but disinterest towards sex, because her hormones are priming her right now to focus entirely on the, on the fetus, and onto the, child who is inside. But for a man, if he doesn't really attune to that change, you would actually find that suddenly it spells disaster for the relationship. Just after delivering a baby, something changes in woman. She becomes a little more irritable. And then after 2 years, 3 years, there would be another change. And then woman would actually get into, closer to menopause. And similarly for men, there would be andropause. So if a man is reaching andropause, a woman is reaching menopause, a man is going through a difficult, situation in professional life, or a woman is going through a difficult position in professional life, a woman is getting a lot of, late night stressful assignments, a man is going through a lot of, conflict with his team members. Every time there would be something that would change in their, desire for sex, attachment, or affection. And if you cannot attune to that, believe me, after some time, it will spell disaster for the relationship. So it is again the same as if, you have chosen a co-founder, but after some time, you stop tracking.
uh, great, Dr. Atre. Now we have two questions. I mean, one is from Mandat. He just, wanted to know how to know if the founder is one whose team you need to join as an employee. So how do you select your, prospective employer? I think, Mandat, am I right? Am I right? I mean, your interpretation of the question, my interpretation of your question. If you can just, say yes or no in the text box, in the chat box. Oh, great. Thanks, Manat. So Manat is, interested in knowing how to really, taste or, to judge your prospective employer, how to decide whether this employer is the right employer for an individual to join the team with.
Well, on a lighter note, as they say, good decisions come from wisdom, and wisdom comes from bad decisions. So I think you should try, if for enough times to probably learn it harder way. But believe me, if that would be the case, why would you need someone like Mr. Joshi or me? I think now getting back to the science aspect of it, I have always believed that if you want to understand a founder, um, if you want to understand if that is the right kind of person you would like to work with, it is important to, you know, test for temperament. I'll give an example of it. I think most entrepreneurs succeed as entrepreneurs, but fail as businessmen. Similarly, there are a lot of businessmen who succeed as businessmen but fail as organization builders. In other words, not every boyfriend is a husband material, and not every husband is a father material. And similarly, not every entrepreneur is a successful businessman, and not every businessman is a good organization builder. I genuinely think that what separates men from boys is poise. Similarly, what separates men from boys and women from girls is also poise. So at the end of the day, if you were to choose somebody, do not go by degree. Do not go, with the tag of an IIT or MIT or an IIM or an ISB or a Harvard or a Stanford, or do not go by the kind of, funding he or she has got. Please make sure that when you talk to him or her, you kind of, check for temperamental stability, because at the end of the day, people who are poised, people who are well grounded, they have better chance of creating longevity of an organization. And sorry to say, most of us get attracted by the fire in an entrepreneur. And then we feel the heat of that fire, and then we want to leave the organization. So it is important to understand that passion can attract, seriously, passion can attract. But it's the patience of the person which helps you stay in the organization. So look for somebody you can count upon, not someone you can cheer for.
Oh, thanks, Dr. I hope, Mandat, I hope Dr.
You know,
Atre has answered
I'm
your
really
question.
sorry to interrupt, Mr. Joshi. Here, I really get reminded of an anecdote. So,
Okay.
one of the most celebrated organizations of country is Infosys, of course, all of us know.
Yes,
So,
yes, yes.
there is somebody called N.R. Narayanamurthy. All of us are aware of the legend. And then there is somebody called Nandan Nilekani, who again is another legend. So, I was watching this interview of Nandan Nilekani, and Nandan Nilekani was asked by the interviewer that you trusted in N.R. Narayan Murthy's vision of creating an organization, because both of them were working in Patni Computer System, and Nandan
Yeah.
Nilekani was at that time reporting to N.R. Narayan Murthy. And N.R. Narayan Murthy gave this idea of creating an organization, and he asked Nandan Nilekani to be a part of it. And of course, he was doing well. Patni Computer System was also really working pretty well. So when he was asked to leave the job, uh, when he was asked to join the new organization or new venture, Nandan Nilekani was asked by interviewer, "How did you decide whether you wanted to leave a secure job and buy into the vision of N.R. Narayanamurthy?" And he said it was just the man. Just looking at him working for all these months, all these years, I think I just trusted the man and his vision more than the business model. And then he also joked, he said, and apart from that, the fact that he wore glasses, I thought he must be intelligent.
Great. Enjoyed that, Dr. Atre. Thanks. Now we have another question from Akshay. He says, when building a team, what are some of the interview questions to ask? So, questions, I mean, really a very important questions for all who are working with HR department, human resources department, who have responsibility of selecting the right candidate.
Uh, I think, Mr. Joshi, I'm a little confused with the question. Could you help me with, probably helping me understand what exactly Akshay is trying to ask?
I think Akshay is trying to ask that, when you are interviewing somebody for,
Hmm.
building a team, what
Hmm.
are the questions you should ask so
In
that,
an interview.
yes, in an interview.
Okay. Now I get it. Now I get it. Well, I think here that's very important, way to find this. First of all, there was a time when there was this folklore about Azim Premji, and I'm sure it is not correct. It is absolutely, incorrect, because I cannot really see Azim Premji doing that. But there was a time, probably 20, 22 years back, there was a folklore about Azim Premji. I mean, of course, celebrated entrepreneur, Wipro. So the folklore said that whenever Azim Premji wanted to recruit a senior management person, he would ask that person to come early in the morning and would actually make sure that he leaves late in the night. And he would make sure that throughout the day, the guy stays with him. So, according to folklore, he was once asked, why did he do that? And his answer was, Mr. Joshi, it was a very, intriguing answer. He said, I interviewed a man for 20 hours because in first 5 hours, preparation goes. In second 5 hours, education goes. In third 5 hours, upbringing goes. And in fourth 5 hours, person remains.
Oh.
So I really loved it. Though I do not really buy into the notion that it is correct, but I love it. I love the way somebody actually crafted this one.
You
But
know, but I think it is nicely crafted, isn't
so
it?
nicely
I
crafted,
mean,
so nicely
over
crafted.
a period of time, we will be, peeling our, external skins,
Exactly. So,
and we will
all the
be
layers,
exposing.
it is like,
Yeah,
Mr. Joshi, peeling off the layers.
yeah.
So now coming back to Akshay's question, Mr. Joshi, how to peel off the layers? First of all, you should ask all the standard questions. Introduce yourself. What are your strengths and weaknesses? Where do you see yourself 5 years, 10 years down the line? And why do you want to join the organization? For how long will you stay with us? Whatever it is, all the standard questions you should ask. You should always ask these questions for the obvious reason. because you would like to check whether the person was really interested and invested enough to actually prepare for the standard questions. That is of course important. If not anything else, it surely vouches for the fact that the person is really invested in the company or into this job profile that he or she is applying for. But I think what really changes the scenario, Mr. Joshi, is if you want to test someone's knowledge, then ask subject matter questions. If you want to understand someone's EQ, ask stress inducing questions. If you want to understand someone's values, ask decision making questions. If you want to understand someone's approach, ask analytical questions. And if you want to understand someone's intelligence, ask open-ended questions. And if you want to understand someone's real nature, then make him do some unrehearsed tasks. So if you somehow create a potpourri of all these styles, situational questions, decision making questions, uh, I think I've already talked in details about each one of them. So if you create a certain bouquet that incorporates questions from all these types, then I think you'll be able to find out just the right person for your team.
So can you elaborate on the stress inducing questions? Like that becomes very important aspect,
Yeah.
right? It's about EQ. So what kind of any one example of that kind of question?
Yes, Mr. Joshi, I'll give you an example of it. If you talk about a person's real personality, then I am a firm believer that then give him or her two scenarios. First, uh, change, and second, stress. So the best thing about change and stress is they help you understand the other person. Because in change or in stress, in change or under stress, a person's real self surfaces. So whoever you are, in change and stress, they'll resurface. Now, coming back to stress inducing questions, ask questions which would, unsettle the other person. I'll give an example of it. If you think this person is high on values, ask him or her about, a time when he cheated, a time when she manipulated. Ask him or her about the first experience of probably going through embarrassment, going through humiliation. Ask him or her about questions which would challenge his or her attitudes. For instance, if you're talking to somebody who's a vegetarian, ask him or her to talk about why non-vegetarianism is not wrong. Kindly talk about it. I mean, that doesn't mean that you're trying to push him into non-vegetarianism. You are just trying to make sure that the other person doesn't feel settled when he or she talks about it.
Okay,
So
okay.
if you give him or her some kind of a stress, take him to a time when he or she wasn't good, wasn't at his or her best. Talk
Yeah,
about
yeah, yeah.
his or her greatest failure. Talk about one secret he has not really told anybody, and probably which political party did you vote for. And of course, it is important for you to understand that our constitution gives us a right to keep our political preferences private. So when you talk about such questions, see how he or she reacts. Of course, you have to do it within the limits of ethics and laws. You cannot ask about race. You cannot ask about questions related to sexual preferences. You cannot ask questions about age. You cannot ask questions about someone's personal life. But then, even while respecting those don'ts, you can still create a lot of do's which can somehow induce some stress.
Oh, great, great. Nice, very nicely put it. I mean, I think that will be, a tip or two worth, implementing for the HR fellows who have joined. So now we, move to the second, aspect, that is motivation, right?
Yeah.
That's what, as I told you, when an individual joins a team, an employee joins a team as as a team member, he's very high on the motivation. Now there are two, three scenarios. One scenario is he joins with a very high level of enthusiasm, very high level of motivation, but other team members might not be on the same state of emotions and emotional intelligence. In that scenario, what happens and how the incoming member should handle it, or how the team leader should handle it.
Mr. Joshi, I generally feel again, motivation is not an act. Again, it's a process. You have to keep tracking. One person gets motivated by one factor today, tomorrow the factor would change. There is a pretty important anecdote that I heard about Titanic, the giant ship that sank. On Titanic, when people were asked to board their lifeboats, one old woman asked the person sitting in the lifeboat, the person responsible, how much time do we have before we get into the sea? And he said, we are waiting for one more, and it'll be hardly a minute. So she said, would you reserve my place if I just go back to the deck and the dock and do something and come back within 1 minute? He said, yeah. And the woman entered, went back to the ship, and then he went to the dead body of her husband, crossed his dead body. Then there was this this box which had some jewelry. She kind of set it away, and then she pushed it away, and then she went there and took a basket of fruits and came back. I love this anecdote. It's amazing, isn't it? She crossed the dead body of her husband. She pushed away a box full of jewelry, and then got the basket full of fruits. Why? Because suddenly priorities change. Suddenly motivation changes.
Yeah.
What is motivation? Motivation is made up of two words: motive plus activation. So if you can activate someone's motive, the other person gets motivated. And if you want to activate someone's motive, first of all, you'll have to identify what that motive is. Now, going back to Abraham Maslow's need hierarchy, I'm sure most of the viewers, most of the participants would know of this need hierarchy of Abraham Maslow, where you start with physiological needs, then safety needs, then esteem needs, and beach mein there is a social needs. So you go through physiological needs, then you go through safety needs, then you go through social needs, then esteem needs, and then self-actualization needs.
Yeah.
So a lot of people see this need hierarchy as static, but movement of a person, you know, through or in between these echelons, it is always dynamic. So, for example, right now I'm talking about this amazing stuff related to Abraham Maslow, and suddenly you see that there is a fire just behind me. The moment the fire would be behind me, I'll stop, talking all this gyan, and I would simply go there and try to save myself.
Yes, yes,
Or
yes, yes.
probably they would be knock on the door, and probably one of my loved ones would enter and would say that there is something very important I want right now. The first thing I would do is I would act probably put my mic off and video off and say, yeah, please, I'll attend to that. So it changes all the time.
Oh, yes, yes, yes.
Every day it changes. you
Yeah,
know
yeah. Every minute, rather, I mean, every
every minute.
situation, yeah, there will be a different motivation. Yes,
And
yes.
I'll give you an example of this. This is a pretty old saying that do not ask leave from your boss when he or she has just had a conversation on phone with his or her spouse. Bad joke. But believe me, that's exactly how it goes. You cannot really, ask for leave from a boss if he or she has just had a tense
Yeah,
conversation
they are
with his or her
irritated.
spouse.
Yeah, they are
So my
irritated.
point is, it is important for you to keep tracking someone's change in terms of motives as well. I'll give an example of it. In our organization, we had this team member uh, who was a trainer and who would come to the class and who was not teaching properly, who would come to our training classes and would not teach properly. He would not follow the template that we had, and he would just start incorporating his own value system into it. And the moment we said that you shouldn't be doing this, he said, okay, then I'll leave. And he said it because he was the one who used to come buy this huge car of his father. So he did not need money. He was more rich than all the founder members put together. He was in no need of money. He had a huge factory, and he was teaching only. He was teaching only because he liked to teach, or he was training only because he liked to train. Now, if you say to him that if you don't teach well, we'll ask you to leave, he would say, I'll leave right away. I mean, you cannot really, govern me through, or you cannot regulate or motivate me through fear. Now, that's why, especially in Hinduism, there is a philosophy which says Sam, Dam, Dand, Bhed. I think it's a brilliant way of looking at motivation. So when you talk about Sam, Dam, Dand, Bhed, Sam means by aligning, by affiliation, by respect. That is called Sam. Dam, that is through incentives, not through greed, through incentives, through perks. Then there is third one which says Dand. That means fear, punishment, withdrawal of a privilege. And then fourth, Bhed. Bhed means by using the information you have about that person. So if you have information, that's why they call it management information system. But there's something called gossip, which of course gives you a lot of management information system without investing in technology. So if you have information about that person, then you can always kind of motivate that person. Here I again get reminded of an anecdote where Burger King was asking Pepsi to make sure that in their restaurants, Pepsi was asking Burger King that in their restaurants they should take Pepsi as a drink. The only drink available should be Pepsi. So this man was trying hard, the salesperson. He was trying hard to convince these people of Burger King. But then the manager one fine day said, you are doing it wrong. Let me tell you how to do it. Let me teach you how to do it. And he went to the decision-making person at Burger King and said, look, I think you should take Pepsi as the official drink at Burger King because McDonald's is number one in your segment. Coca-Cola is number one in our segment. And nobody understands the pain of being number two than us.
Yeah.
So the moment Pepsi said, no one understands the pain of being a number two more than us. You are also number two. We are also number two.
Yes.
And both of us would like to be number one.
Perfect.
So we are kind of kindred in spirit. And the person said, yeah, great. Tell me where to sign. So, it's important for you to understand those push buttons to be pushed. You should understand, what motivates the other person. And that is possible only when you have awareness and attunement. When you understand the other person in totality. And of course, when you can do it with your team members, then it is typically the best way to motivate.
Okay, great. No, I understand. Very nicely. So address the fear. I mean, if both of you are on the same same level of the fear, say join hands and try to remove that obstacle or the roadblock.
Absolutely.
Work jointly on removing that roadblock. Oh, great. So, I mean, just, one more question regarding motivation. Then we will take a question from Manish. See, I mean, this becomes, one-to-one scenario. But when there is a, one-to-many scenario, like motivating the whole team, I mean, everybody, all team members as a team, how do we address that? When there's a scenario when there's a failure or there is a discouragement or one particular event because of which whole team is demotivated.
Well, how do especially
please. So I mean, in that scenario what will happen is trying to address individuals' need will not be fruitful, and we need to address a collective demotivation.
Well, I think here you'll have to do four things. So whenever you want to, motivate the entire team or entire organization, then you have to use those four components. The first is symbols, second is rituals, third is folklore or stories, and third is heroes or role models. So if you can somehow use these four in simultaneity. So first is you have to use symbols.
Right.
Just imagine we have a flag, and all of us look at that flag and something inside us melts.
Oh, yes,
It's a
yes,
symbol.
yes.
Similarly, there was a time when in Japan, you could not, throw away any stationery which had logo of that company. So it just could not get into trash because people would be so possessive about the symbol. So make sure that you create symbols. For example, if you look at those golden arches, I mean, look at them. I mean, when Ray Kroc visualized a McDonald's, when Ray Kroc said that I want to buy a McDonald's, when he asked, Dick and Morris McDonald's, when he said I want to buy the franchisee rights of this company and I want to take it to the greatest, level possible, he was asked, why do you want to buy the franchisee rights? And he said a brilliant point. He said, because I realized that whenever I'm going through all the cities of United States of America, there are two places with two symbols. One place is church, where there is a cross, and then there is a court where there is a flag. And I have realized that one church in which people come together for faith,
Yeah.
and there is court where people come together for justice. But where
Yes.
do people come together to have a good time? Just the way we have a cross, just the way we have a flag, we should have golden arches. And that's when the McDonald's with those golden arches, that became the greatest symbol. He said, I am buying that symbol. So just imagine that symbol motivated everyone. The name McDonald's, he made sure that it becomes a symbol of people coming together. Second,
Oh, yes,
there is
yes.
something called rituals. So all the organizations, if a leader or if a manager wants to you know manage or rather motivate everyone, then he or she should use a lot of rituals. I'll give an example of it. In our own organization, at one point of time, I think I'm talking about probably 13, 14 years back, we made sure that we, all of us compete every day for our customer ratings or student ratings or trainee ratings. And each one of us should compete, each one should compete. And including the founder members. And every day on the list, my name would always be there, my name would also be there, and my fellow trainers name would also be there. And it became a ritual. All of us, every day, all of us would come at the same point, we'll have tea together and we'll look at that board and we would say, look at my average training points, look at your average training points. And there would be people who would be happy. They would be making sure that they work extra hard to make sure that when that ritual happens, they don't feel bad. Or for
Yeah.
that matter, there was a consulting assignment that I was doing almost 16 years back with an IT company, Indore-based IT company. And we made sure that we create a ritual that because that company was going through a little low morale, we should just make sure that whenever people look at each other for the first time, they give high fives. They give high fives to each other, high fives to each other,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
irrespective of the level. The greatest change happened when there was one person in that company who used to work in Pentry. I still remember his name. His name was Mukesh. And when Mukesh met CTO on a staircase, and Mukesh, while holding on to the tray with all the cups, he actually raised his hand and said, high five, sir, high five. And CTO was so happy and said, high five, high five. And then it became a kind of story. Everybody said, you know something, Mukesh gave a high five to CTO. You know
CTO,
something,
yeah.
Mukesh gave high five to CTO. So there's a lot of ritual. I mean, of course, every ritual loses its charm beyond a certain time. So you have to keep changing rituals. You cannot have one ritual followed all the time. So, for instance, in McDonald's, only Ray Kroc would always say, if you have time to lean, you have time to clean. Now that became a ritual. So every time there would be anything on the ground, he would make sure that he would pick up and he would throw it into the bins. Third is stories, folklore. I just talked about ritual becoming a folklore, isn't it?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then of course, role models, heroes. You should have heroes because heroes have this amazing ability to tap into people's consciousness and help them understand, values that this team champions. So, if you have heroes, you should create heroes. You should make sure that there is this employee of the day, or there should be this, employee of the month, or the rising star of this. But the only point is when you are creating heroes, you have to be extremely fair. You have to be extremely, discreet about making sure that there is no manipulation going on. Because in these four things, if somehow they get this feeling that you're trying to manipulate them emotionally, then it probably loses charm.
Uh, thanks, Dr. Atre. Now we'll, address a question from Manish. Is it a good idea to enhance healthy competition in the organization to increase productivity?
Well, I think Manish has already made the question easier by including healthy. I mean, of course, of course. I mean, something, I'm sure, Mr. Joshi, you must be aware that in economics, there's a wonderful saying, and I love that saying. In economics, there is a saying that says competition is the most fair policy. I love
Yes.
this line. Just imagine just how beautiful this line is. Competition is the most fair policy. So if there is healthy competition, just introduce it into market. And believe me, prices will rationalize themselves. Quality will make sure that somehow, you get the best quality. Because there is nothing better than healthy competition. You put healthy competition into any marketplace, you put healthy competition into any workplace, into any social space, and you would find that suddenly, if there is healthy competition where ends do not justify means, where ends and means are equally important, you would find that at the end of the day, the overall morale of the organization would go up. So yes, healthy competition, no other substitute to it. It's the best way.
Thanks, Dr. Atre. Since we are, about to, I mean, we are all running a little late, it seems, or, it is getting extended. So one point which we would should, visit today itself is conflict resolution. Because
Yep.
it is one of the most crucial, part where every team, every employee, and every organization will be going through on day-to-day basis. So how do we really address conflict resolution in a way which can, become a win-win situation for the two parties, two employees, or your leader and the team members, and as well as the organization? See, normally what happens is if two employees are, not at their best terms, or they have ongoing conflict, ultimately the organization is tend become a loser.
Yeah.
Same
Agree.
way, team leader becomes a loser. So
So I
how do
think, yeah.
you address conflict as a leader, as an entrepreneur, and as a team member? I mean, all from all three perspectives. Then we'll take one question from Manjunath
Yeah.
before we close.
Um,
Yeah,
Mr. Joshi, one of my all-time favorite trainers and authors has been Dr. Stephen Covey, Seven Habits of Highly Effective People.
yeah, yeah. True.
I think he, in many ways, I think he was probably one of the greatest gems of our times. Now, the man gave a very good answer to this in his book. He talks about, whenever there's conflict, then the best way to resolve conflict is to use the Greek philosophy of logos, pathos, and ethos. He says that it's important to understand that you can appeal to someone's logic only when you understand someone's emotions. And you can appeal to logic, and you can also win respect for understanding the other person's emotions if the person has trust on your character. Brilliantly put. Huh? So, logos, pathos, ethos. He says that you can appeal to someone's logic only when you can understand someone's emotions. But you can only appeal to someone's logic and win respect for understanding his or her emotions when the person has faith in your character. So it all
Right.
starts with trust. There should be basic trust. If there
Right.
is
Right.
lack of basic trust, I see a lot of people who get into conflicts regularly. And I often ask them, if it is happening too frequently, now the question is not on the person's behavior, but on person himself or herself. Now you are doubting the other person's intentions. Now you are doubting the other person's, very fabric rather than his or her features. But I think
Right.
this is a brilliant way to put, and I kind of, took it from Dr. Stephen Covey. But now I'll come to something that I believe in, probably with my observation and experience and study rather. Uh, I think, Mr. Joshi, you should not resolve conflicts. You should manage conflicts for the obvious
Okay.
reason that if if there is no conflict, there is no creation.
There is
All
no
creation,
competition. Okay.
yeah, all creation. So all creation requires some conflict. But there is another important point to understand. The conflict should not be based on the, or should not be rooted, or should not be emerging from values. Conflict should emerge from issues.
Okay.
If,
Not from
if
egos also, isn't
Yeah,
it?
not from egos. I mean, of course,
Yes.
not from egos. Uh, but of course, not from values. At values level, people should have this congruence. But on issues, people should have conflict. Because as they say, if two persons always agree, then one of them is useless. And if two persons always disagree, both of them are useless. So, if you look at, people, they should have conflict. But I am coming from an emotional and social intelligence point of view. Mr. Joshi, I genuinely think that most of the organizations where conflicts take place are the ones where confrontations are not encouraged. I believe that any organization, any society, any community, any company, any family where confrontation is encouraged, where you can assertively put your point forward, upset a few people, where dissent is respected, where someone is encouraged to, question your masterpiece and destroy it if it, is not the right thing to be done. If you can somehow make that culture so democratic without being offended, without being defensive, if you can, you know learn and listen, and you can compare and juxtapose, then such confrontation encouraging culture normally doesn't have conflict. It's the same as anger management. There is nothing like anger. It all starts, Mr. Joshi, with annoyance. But
Yes.
when annoyance blends with residual anger inside oneself, then it becomes anger. you know so
Right. Right. Right.
I mean, if something happens to me, I'll get annoyed, I'll not get angry. But if I already have some subconscious material that I have repressed, if I have some pent up emotion, if I have some already incurred negative feelings, then that annoyance will blend with that subconscious material, and then it will become anger. Similarly, conflict resolution, as I said, the best way is logos, pathos, egos, logos, pathos, ethos. But from my point of view, conflict should be managed, and the best way to do it is to encourage confrontations.
Right. You speak your mind.
You speak your mind.
Yeah. You speak
Absolutely.
your mind. You ask questions and get those
Yes.
answers. Yes.
Very
Yes.
true.
Yes. Very correct. Very correct. So now, Dr. Atre will take two more questions. So first question is from Manjunath. He said, He's asking, could negative reinforcement be rituals in an organization? So he is connecting to, our earlier discussion regarding rituals and symbols and, folklores and all.
Well, I think there is a brilliant line in Hindi, Mr. Joshi, that is called "Bhay bin preet na hove Gopala." You know? So,
Yeah.
they say "Bhay bin preet na hove." So, here "bhay" doesn't mean fear. Here "bhay" means awe. There is a different word in English. I love English for this,
This particular word.
nuances.
Yeah, yeah,
So there's
yeah.
this word called awe. And awe
Yeah.
means respect born out of fear. No, fear born out of respect. I love this. Huh? So awe. I said I'm under awe of Mr. Joshi. You know, when I say I'm
Yeah.
under awe of Mr. Joshi, that means there is fear, but it is born out of respect. So if you talk in terms of ritual, which is giving a certain amount of negative reinforcement, then I genuinely believe that if we go by Sam Dam Dand Bhed, then Dand has a lot of value. Anger is a tool which should be used. Negative reinforcement should be used. There is nothing wrong in it. But my point is still the same. That negative reinforcement should not be a fear born out of, putting foot on someone's foot. It is
Right.
not fear born out of pulling someone's leg. It should not be fear born out of cutting someone's oxygen supply. It should be fear born out of the sheer respect. It should be fear born out of, awe. If that is the case, I genuinely believe that yes, negative reinforcement is important because bhai bin preet na hoye Gopala.
Thanks. Now we have one more question from Dr. Seema Rafiq. How to treat people who always spread negativity in the organization, and maybe it be related to personal and organizational issues. So I mean, spreading negativity about personal issues of an individual, or some organizational issues related to some individuals, but they're spreading negativity in a big way throughout the organization, throughout the team. Am I correct, Dr. Sima? Have I interpreted your question rightly? If you can type yes, okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, Dr. Atre, yeah.
So the question is how to deal with people who always spread negativity in organization. Is
Yes.
that the case?
It seems
Yeah.
yes.
Well, first of all, I genuinely believe that, over the years, I have realized, Mr. Joshi, that, say, if I believe that XYZ spreads a lot of negativity in the organization, but if you don't believe that XYZ spreads negativity, and say if Dr. Seema also believes that, oh no, XYZ, at times spreads negativity. So look at this. I believe that the rating of XYZ on spreading negativity in the organization is 9 out of 10. For you, it is 2 out of 10, and probably for Dr. Seema, it is 6 out of 10 or 5 out of 10. So why is this a difference? Why is there this difference? The difference is I have realized over the years, not because of XYZ's negativity, but because of my oversensitivity. There are times when because of my sensitivity, level, I kind of, draw more negativity, or probably I have more impact of XYZ's negativity on me. So first of all, as an emotionally and socially intelligent person, you should practice awareness that is it because of XYZ's negativity or because of my oversensitivity? Because if
Oh,
it is
yes.
because of my oversensitivity, then I should, treat myself, not XYZ. I mean, that's the first thing you should do. So the best way to do is, ask all the people, have a sample size of, at least 10 odd people, and ask them, do you feel the same negative impact of XYZ? If everybody is unanimously saying yes, then I'll probably believe, yes, it is the problem lies in XYZ. But if the problem doesn't lie in XYZ, then probably you have to work simultaneously on managing that person's negativity and your oversensitivity.
Your
That is one point.
oversensitivity. Yeah.
Second point, I
Absolutely.
genuinely believe that whenever people offer a lot of negativity, or when a lot of people radiate negativity, sometimes it it is their job profile to, you know push a little negative reinforcement in the system. And now I'm talking as an entrepreneur.
Yes.
There's a pretty old saying. I'll change that saying because the one word in that saying is a little too offensive, and I cannot use it on public platform. But there's a pretty old saying, and Mr. Joshi, that saying is, it takes three persons to build an enterprise. It takes three persons to build an enterprise: a visionary, a businessman, and a scoundrel. You know, it takes three persons to build an enterprise: a visionary, a businessman, and a scoundrel. Okay. Now, there are times when somebody has to play the role of a scoundrel. Somebody has to, somehow create some kind of a, ripple of negativity in order to ensure that there is the right mix of, that this right mix of positive and negative in the system.
Yeah.
And when
Create
I'm
the,
saying,
tension in the rope so
yeah,
that
push and
the
pull,
rope becomes tight on
tension.
the, yeah,
That,
yeah.
because I think, Mr. Joshi, both of us are beyond that age, and I mean, none of us is a motivational speaker. I think both of us work in pretty tangible ideas, and I
Yes.
think I'm not a motivational speaker, or you're not a motivational speaker who would say that, oh, you should always ride on the wave of positivity. I mean, that's just not possible. I
Yes.
mean, negative stays for a reason. The fact that we have negative emotions like anger, sadness, contempt, if evolution believes negativity has some, value, then of course, who are we to challenge if there is negativity in organization? So I genuinely believe that there are times when someone's job profile entails spreading a little negativity. But then, of course, I'm just giving, answer to a lot of people through Dr. Seema's question. Third thing, oversensitivity you have to see. Second, you have to see whether that person is behaving in terms of profile like that or what. And now third is, I genuinely believe uh, Buddhism has a brilliant view on this. I may not be a firm believer or a great believer in religion, but I am a great believer in utility of religion. And I'm taking this idea from one of my mentors who said it to me once. So he said to me that I do not believe much in religion, but I'm a firm believer in the utility of religion. And I genuinely want to take it from there, that Buddhism gives a wonderful point. Buddhism says, one of the tenets of Buddhism is that all the negative people who come in your life, you have to treat them as teachers. Because if you look at them as teachers, they have a lot of value to offer to you. So at times, it takes a good fight to discover your might. If there is no good fight, then you don't discover your might. So you have to probably not just change the person who offers that negativity, but you also have to change your view, change your own attitude towards that negativity, and utilize it as an opposing force against which you can discover your own strength. And then, of course, if you can give feedback to that person, that's perfect, because sometimes people are negative just because nobody really is giving them feedbacks. And that's when we come back to the same point, Mr. Joshi, that normally those organizations which encourage confrontation do not have conflicts.
Thank you very much, Dr. Atre. In fact, we have overshot the time, so I'm
We have.
forced to I'm forced to close it. But there is one more crucial aspect that is about communication, which has been left, and I'm looking forward to maybe another short session where we can address one or two questions and make it open for everybody to participate and ask question to you directly.
Absolutely, Dr.
I'm looking
Absolutely,
forward to
Mr. Joshi.
that.
Absolutely,
And
Mr. Joshi, always a call away.
thanks for your time. Thanks for being with us. Thanks, friends. Thanks for participating. I appreciate your support. I appreciate your encouragement. Have a good night.
Good night,
Have a
everyone.
nice time.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye. Bye. Take care.